Living a life in full is a conversation you always wanted to have with that person who gave an amazing TED Talk, or the author of one of your favorite books, or that inspirational Olympian you always wanted to know more about. It's graduate-level conversations with those making a difference in the world and in the lives of others. This show brings you new ideas and approaches so that you can live a life in full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout, and I hope you enjoy this episode. This episode is brought to you by the nonprofit I founded, the Center for Global Initiatives. The Center is an all-volunteer organization, so there are no salaries, and thus all tax-deductible donations can go to the work. While our key country partner is in Tanzania, our work is global and generally focused in the areas of education and healthcare. We also help others to get their nonprofits started or augment others' project-based initiatives. It's our goal to open-source humanitarian intervention and to help make it easier for others to do more good in the world. We are proud to have been ranked a great nonprofit every year since 2011 and to have achieved a platinum-level rating by GuideStar. Links in this episode's show notes will take you to published articles on our outcomes, a number of helpful tools, and downloadable resources, which are all free, always. Please visit us at centerforglobalinitiatives.org and be sure to watch our video at patreon.com/Dr. Chris Stout to learn more. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout. How many Mondays do you have left? Statistically, we all get about 4,000 Mondays in our lifetime. So if you're halfway through your life, you might have roughly 2,000 Mondays to go. The good news is that you are in charge of how you want to spend those days. The question is, will you be toiling away at a job that you hate, or will you be creating a career that you love? Will you choose to scroll mindlessly for hours a day, or will you pursue hobbies and travel that light you up? Will you be dreading the inevitable end, or will you be living your life in full in a way that allows you to meet the Grim Reaper with a smile? These are the existential ponderances in which Jodi Wellman thrives. Jodi is a speaker, author, executive coach, and facilitator of living lives worth living. She founded 4,000 Mondays to help make the most of the time that we are lucky to have above the ground. With over 25 years of corporate leadership experience, most recently as Senior Vice President of Operations at a leading health and lifestyle organization, Jodi has led private CEO advisory boards and corporate teams to work well and live even better. Jodi has a Master's of Applied Psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, where she's also an assistant instructor and facilitator in the Penn Resilience Program. She is an ICF Professional Certified Coach and a Certified Professional Coactive Coach. Jodi has been featured in the New York Times, Oprah Daily, Fast Company, CNBC, Forbes, Psychology Today, and the Los Angeles Times, just to name a few. Jodi's TEDx talk, How Death Can Bring You Back to Life, has over 1.3 million views and was the 14th most watched TEDx talk in 2022. Her new book, You Only Die Once, How to Make It to the End with No Regrets, made Adam Grant's summer reading list as a next Big Idea Club must-read, and we'll be doing a deep dive into it and her work in this episode. Hey, Jodi, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on, and I feel like I should say I've been dying to meet you.
And I will high-five you to that. Thank you.
All right. So I so enjoyed your book. I so enjoy your website. I mean, people will put links galore in the show notes and whatnot, but I don't feel like I have a great grasp of your origin story. So maybe for those, myself and those that maybe don't know about you and your work, could you share maybe the starters, like Jodi in the early years, college, and then thereafter, what brought you to where you are today?
Hey, yeah, I'll do the flyby tour. How about of that?
Sounds
And
good.
yeah, origin. So I was born and raised near Toronto. That might explain if you're wondering, is it Minnesota or is it Canada? Yeah, if I say about, it's Canada. And
About, okay.
yep, and or sorry. And my husband and I moved to Chicago about 17 years ago, and we thought we were going to be there short term and loved it and ended up staying. And now we live in Palm Springs. And so by, rewinding the tape back in the Toronto area, I got into the health club business for the first 17 years and worked as an executive running health clubs, a national health club chain. And that was what brought me to Chicago. And, the whole time though, in life when you're doing a thing and you're doing a thing and you're enjoying it and you're doing it well, but we are multifaceted. I was always intrigued by this absurdity that death is on the horizon for all of us. And here we are, we're working hard to love our lives at the time, working in the fitness business. It was all about, enjoy and have more energy and vibrancy. And it was all sort of like this bizarro, yeah, but then that's going to be juxtaposed against we're going to be loving our life today and then we could be dead tomorrow. That was always interesting to me. Shortly after I moved to Chicago, my mom passed away. So she was 70, my goodness, I've just aged her. She was 58. And,
gosh.
This is the thing where I'm very clear that the impetus for me was really started around pursuing this topic of, carpe diem, live before we die, because of her passing. And it wasn't because she died relatively early. Weirdly enough, it was because as I was cleaning out her apartment after she died, she had like the vestiges of all the dreams and hopes and plans and goals and business ideas in her
Ooh,
desk and in her laptop that she didn't really take action on. And
wow.
and I knew about some of these things, right? Like I knew she was writing another short story or writing a draft of a book or doing business cards for her hiking stick business because she was hand carving them. And she was so creative and had all these cool
Wow.
ideas, but didn't execute.
Mm.
And part of it was because of fear. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other large part was just this idea like, well, I'll do it later. I'll send the manuscript out later. And
Mm-hmm.
she didn't have a later. And so that for me, as I was going through what I call the land of dormant intentions, her place, it was so sad. And I can also be cheeky about it. It was like
Yeah.
this kick in the pants for me of like, oh, honey, like you got dreams too. Do not
Yeah.
let them die with you. So that was a
Mm-hmm.
big starter. And then, shortly after, well, shortly, relatively speaking, several years later, I went to the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program at UPenn. And that was huge for me because studying positive psychology, I knew was going to just be life expanding, but I indulged this topic of memento mori, which is remembering we must die. So I did my thesis on it. And that was when they blew the doors open. I was like, well, now there is no turning back. So just for 10 years after I left the leadership roles in the health club business, I worked for 10 years doing leadership development and executive coaching. And that was good and great too, except I just knew I wanted something more in touch with what made my heart beat fast, in life when you're
Mm-hmm.
like, but there's this
Mm-hmm.
thing I'm passionate about. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
every kid's dream to do what you love. So I found a way to make that happen after I did all the research around it.
That's great. Do you feel that your mom's passing was sort of the catalyst then to get to UPenn and to pursue? I mean, because you could pursue a variety of things. Psychology is kind of the variety pack of flavors and whatnots. But you chose, UPenn. Was Seligman? Did you study under Martin
Yeah,
when you?
yeah.
Yeah,
Marty
yeah.
Seligman was definitely, and we got to. I mean, I consider that to be just one of the biggest coups of the experience, learning from
Mm-hmm.
the father of, yeah, positive
Yeah,
psychology. You're
yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah.
So, and then from that was the goal then to get into executive coaching? Was it, kind of, you had probably a nice vista in front of you of
Mm,
opportunities and choices
mm-hmm,
and perhaps even challenges. What then
mm-hmm,
spurred you to take the route that you chose, or routes? Because as you mentioned,
mm-hmm.
multifaceted. You are not a person of singular, focus and emphasis. So tell us about that. What was before you and how'd you make selections and choices?
Yeah, such a good question. And I love looking back on it because it's just these funny little moments in life. You can either take the path or not take the path. And that,
Mm-hmm.
is actually really important in this sort of story about like living like we mean it. It's not leaving a path that you want to go down untread. So I had been, so yeah, 17 years health club career, and I was itching. Have you ever been in a situation where it's good, it's fine, and it's just not enough for you, and you don't know what else to do though? And so instead of
Mm-hmm.
figuring that out, what I did was I just hoped. I hoped to be plucked out of my, disenchantment. I mean, the good news is that I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty sure I faked it pretty well. I was so engaged, and yet I was hoping for something different and better, but I didn't know. and I wanted to be headhunted out and helicoptered out. And I just, this is silly, but I have this stapler story I think about where I was in my office and I was just, doing my job, stapling a couple things, and my stapler ran out. Okay, no big deal. And I went to the supply closet, loaded in a row of staplers into my stapler, and it was this distinct moment where I said to myself, I'd better not be here by the time this row of staples runs out. And it was like game on. But here's the weird thing, Chris, is that I like skipped back to my office that day, and then I did diddly squat about it. Because again, I wasn't in charge of it. I was hoping something would happen to me. And then a year later, I ran out of staples and I felt like a bag of dirt, and I reloaded it again. And I was like, no, but for real this time, I will not be here by the time this row. And it fast forward another year. So I have good experience in extending your welcome, of like my expiry date where I needed to figure it out. And so to be honest, timing wise, this was after my mom had passed and I had the voice of reasons swimming around me going, honey, life's short. What are you doing? And it actually caused for me quite a bit of angst, this sort of dual tension about knowing better. Like I don't want to end up like my mom. I didn't think I was going to be dying in my, mid 30s, late 30s, but you never know. So then I did leave. I got a coach who helped me see that I wanted to coach and get into leadership development. And so I made a shift and I did that for 10 years. And it was really fantastic. I needed more a sense of autonomy and independence and creative flexibility, and all those values matter to me. So I got to do that, and I worked with a business partner, and we started our own firm doing leadership coaching, and it was so great. And I always had that niggling though of this topic of memento mori. I knew that it was something I wanted to figure out how to do it. But I'll be honest with you, I was scared because I thought, well, how am I going to talk to companies about the fact that everyone's going to die? How am I going to talk about death, which is like the number one fear?
Exactly. Yeah. That'll be popular.
Right. Why am I not getting booked? But the good news again was that it was through all that I realized I want more knowledge, I want more credibility, and I want more confidence, and that's what made me apply for grad school. And that was then the boost that I needed. And you can appreciate this with all of your kind of educational background pursuits. It's like some of us just sometimes need the empirical evidence or that validation that, okay, this is a thing. It's more than just a lovely philosophy to seize the day. It's that there is science around the idea about scarcity of time that can help motivate us. And once I felt like, well, that's something I can package and talk to companies about, and that is something I can very confidently use, knowing with my corporate background together. So that's really how it kind of all flowed together. The stapler to the coaching, and then the realization of no, how ironic would it be if here I am, the one studying and believing in and trying to encourage other people to live the life you've longed for while you're lucky to be alive, and I'm the one not doing it. That sounded horribly ironic.
Right. Yeah. A little disingenuous. So, and now you've sort of created for all of our listeners this stapler totem. When people see that stapler, they're going to think back, Jodi had this experience and I just reloaded the stapler and I really hate doing what I'm doing. And, TikTok, we're going to see how long the stapler will run. So I would imagine too, tell me, would it give you perhaps a greater empathic appreciation of those that you work with and coach too, to kind of go through that, okay, I've had a pseudo epiphany. I've realized that, that the clock is ticking. I need to, get on my horse and, get things going. But, 365 days later, I realized that the clock is ticking, and it's just Groundhog Day that you kind of just keep repeating, but maybe no rinse in that repeat. So, does that come out like when you've worked with people coaching wise, or tell us about that?
Absolutely. I did the one-on-one coaching for 10 years or so, and I no longer do one-on-one, but I do group work and keynotes and workshops. So there are people everywhere, right? And most of what I do is informed by the individual stories that I think we commonly share. And I think some of us try to hide the fact because we might present our most successful external versions. And we don't talk about our fears as easily. And so I love that, like, I will always be my very first client Like I
Mm-hmm.
see, I having experienced that stuckness, the fear,
Mm-hmm.
the taking life for granted. As I refer in my TEDx, I had, 10 years of eating disorders because that was my really wayward way of coping with my own lack of control. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I raised my hand, been there, done that. And I do then see very clearly this notion that we have even to this day. Like I don't have this licked, and I never to pretend to say that I've got life nailed, because I need to be reminded to live daily. So I
Yeah.
love that this is just a really ongoing relationship with engaging and disengaging and taking life for granted, and then all of a sudden get coming back in and realizing the sanctity of time, and then so I need to be reminded every week that, oh, my countdown's on. Like this week I have 1,809 Mondays left as far as average goes, and I
Uh,
need that to say, hun, that thing that you've been thinking about, what are you waiting for? And
yeah.
I can rely on my experiences, and it does help me, of course, relate to other people. In the book, I use other people's anecdotes. I name them. No one has been revealed their dirty secrets, but the little stories about someone who would regret, not making up with their father, or not learning the tango, or not booking that family reunion trip to Prague. Like I use other people's
Yeah.
stories because it's all one shared experience,
It's
don't you think?
it, yeah, absolutely. I was going to say it's the anonymity, nevertheless it feels like, how did Jody know about this? This happened to me. How do you know? So I think it speaks to the universality of these kinds of things, and I think you picked just wonderful ways to deconstruct that and to have this kind of universal thing. This is not
Mm.
a unique thing.
Mm.
Anybody that's conscious has these kinds of experiences.
Right.
I want to get into your book, and then I want to really like unpack a ton of it. But one of the other things I want to talk about before we dive into that is 4,000 Mondays.
Mhm.
So love it. I know what it's all about. For people that have not had a chance to check it out yet, could you share how it came about and what it's all about?
Yeah, yeah. So 4,000 Mondays is the name of the company that I started, which, is for speaking and writing. And I have resources. I write a Monday blog post, and it's 4,000 is the spoiler alert is that we roughly get 4,000 weeks to live. And so that for me was like, well, there's a number that's fascinating.
Hmm.
And that's designed to be the wake up. And then, the You Only Die Once, How to Make It to the End with No Regrets, is the book that was born out of this work, and it was out of my thesis. So it's based in research, but I promise that it's unboring in the way that I
Hmm.
present this information. And that was yeah, I knew I needed to take my research thesis and make it way snarkier and way more fun and way more applicable. So
Yeah.
there's science, but it's wrapped with, silliness and action and, back to the real stories of real people and like the reality of it all. So yeah, it was like a foregone conclusion, like, oh, this is going to be part of what I do. I can't not. And I think that's
Yeah.
actually been thematic. Like I think for you, because I know you pursue lots of different things. Sometimes when you just feel like, dare you call some things a calling, or just this grab where you're like, I
Hmm.
can't not go for it. Like I
Hmm.
can't not. It's not even up to me anymore almost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's very true, and I think, it's a fortunate kind of thing. I think some people maybe kind of fall into it, kind of Mr. Magoo inadvertently, and other
Mm,
people, like myself and perhaps you, from what you've described thus far, interpersonally, you kind of have to do it and design it and remind yourself and create structures and
yeah.
scaffolds in your life to be
Yeah.
able to either make it happen or make it a little less, less friction, make it easier to happen. You also, I can't remember if it was your website. I can't remember, but what you had mentioned Kevin Kelly's life countdown. I can't remember if that was in the book or not. But could you share what that's all about with listeners who may not yet be familiar with it?
Oh, right. Oh, I am honestly not familiar with Kevin Kelly, but I can speak to this idea of a life countdown in concept. Just and you can tell me if I've hit
Okay.
the tail, pin
Okay.
the tail on the donkey, or and
All
add
right.
to it. Actually,
All right.
because this idea about temporal scarcity is the scientific underpinning. It's like in life when we recognize that something is rare or it's temporary, kind of a limited time only situation, we we tend to pay attention to that. And all of a sudden we see that thing as way more valuable than if it was to be unlimited in supply. I mean, talk about the whole supply chain issue during COVID. Everything
Right,
mattered.
right. Yeah.
Some things that we couldn't get. So when we look at our life and we do the countdown, and so that's where I take the 4,000 Mondays and I get more granular. Like I have this like a simple calculator on my website where we can plug in your information. Like for men might live on average to 78, women might live on average till 83. Your country will vary, but what is that countdown? And it's
Yeah.
that scarcity approach, which I realize, like in a traditional coaching sense or in a traditional self-help sense, that's usually taboo. Right? It's like, well, we would way rather talk about abundance than scarcity. And I'd be like, yeah,
Right.
it sounds better, but it doesn't work as well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We need the pain
Right.
aversion rather than the pursuit of pleasure sometimes. So this is that discomfort that's intentional, slight discomfort. Like I don't want anyone sitting on a pin, but I do want us to have a little bit of like a little bit of a boost of like, oh my gosh, like
Right.
my time is wow. It's like I did a workshop last night. It was virtual, so people were entering into the chat their number of Mondays left and how that made them feel. I always ask that. And of course, some people, when they're like 2,700 left out of 4,000, they're like, oh, I think it's a good number to work with. But most of us, when we're maybe at the halfway mark-ish, start to look at it and go, I think I need to take my life more serious or less serious, depending on your jam.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So I
Exactly.
don't know if I've gotten near what you were talking about life down
Yeah.
countdown. Tell me more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, a million years ago, I used to go to the TEDs back when Richard Saul Wurman was doing them in the 90s, and I had an opportunity to meet Kevin Kelly. And Kevin's like I forget, he's got kind of a cool CEO kind of name. It's not the E, he's like chief, not evangelist either, but some kind of cool hip thing with Wired magazine. And Kevin Kelly is just sort of like as Tim Ferriss refers to him as like the world's most interesting man. He does a variety of things, has for all of his life, and just fascinating character. And I'm also part of the Long Now Foundation out in San Fran, and I'm also a big fanboy of Stuart Brand. And when I was a child, the Whole Earth catalog came out, and it was sort of like a paper analog version of the World Wide Web in 1968, sort of thing. So anyway, Kevin's point is he has a thing. I'll put links in the LinkedIn piece in the show notes. Called My Life Countdown that I stumbled across. And then I wrote a piece of, I probably pulled in the Living a Life in Full brand to it, but, how much time you need to ask yourself the question, how much time do I have left? So it's very resonant, with kind of what you're talking about. So what Kevin does, and I'll tell you what Stuart does. Kevin, this is a little too hardcore for me, but he did very similar to what you're talking about, like with how many days. And so he did the math, and of course he kind of did it. Probably he looked at his his genetic profile to kind of see likelihood of death to the 10th minute. But he has a timer on his on his screen on his computer every day. So when he's on his machine, he sees and it's like counting down like 48, 47, just like, oh my gosh. So that I couldn't manage. But one of the other things that he and Stuart talked about was like Stuart Brand, golly molly, he's got to be in his 80s, and just a frickin' firebrand. And I'll put some stuff if you or audience members aren't familiar with him, but he's just a super cool guy. But anyway, he talks about do any kind of project worth doing, writing a book, creating a piece of art, making a documentary, whatever it might be, takes probably 5 years to do. To do it right. These are big projects. This isn't writing a blog. These are big projects. So I am X years old. I have Y years left if I'm going to live to Z years of age. So how many 5-year blocks do I have, to be able to do that? And that's sort of like his variation of Derek Sivers. If it's not hell yes, then it's no. And it's like if he can't do what it is in whatever the opportunity is within that 5-year block of time, like he doesn't have enough, then that gives him a tool to differentiate. Okay, I've got 3 really great opportunities, but I've got 10 years in which I think I could accomplish them.
Yeah,
I got to pick 2. So I
Yeah.
think it's another interesting way to kind of, unpack that and make choices and decisions. You've been talking about, what can be that spur, what can be that,
Yeah.
like you don't have to sit on a pin, I like that. But, what are the kinds of things for like, a lot of the rest of us mortals that maybe need that little, bit
Yes.
of gumption and being able to get go. And these superheroes like the Kevin Kellys and the
Hmm.
Stuart Brands, are able to, do these other kinds of things to say, and it varies too. If you're in your 30s, it's a lot different than if you're 60s or if you're in your,
Yeah.
70s or 80s too.
Yeah.
So, but I think
Yeah.
to your point, it's like, regardless of where you are on that scale,
Yeah.
what are you doing today? What are you doing tomorrow? So,
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. You realize like I am just so giddy over here listening. I know all these examples, and what we're talking about are just creative ways to jar ourselves to look
mm-hmm,
at this scarcity of time. And for some of us, it could be doing that the mathematic gymnastics, right? About
mm-hmm,
same idea about like if it's 5 years to do a project, some people take really big trips, like overseas, maybe once every
mm-hmm.
5 years. And when you stop and you go, well, that might mean that I only have 12 left or seven left or four left. Like, what does that mean? Because we have this
Yeah.
notion, let's just talk for a second about our instinct is to deny death, right? It's very distasteful. I mean, like
Yeah.
it's a crappy reality, and so we're not idiots psychologically. We found ways to just deacon deny it, and we do
Mm-hmm.
it honestly for just to save ourselves. However, existential psychologists make it clear that we're actually not saving ourselves. We're actually unwittingly creating sometimes even more anxiety. The willingness to go there, the willingness to acknowledge and say, yeah, I have this many years slash Mondays slash 5 year increments slash however you want to slice and dice, like this many Thanksgiving dinners with my aging parents, or this many summers until my
Mm.
kids don't want to be seen with me anymore,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
this many great canvases I will paint because at this rate I'm doing one every 3 years, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we, the willingness to acknowledge the deadline can be the thing that helps us stop procrastinating.
Yeah.
And, but when we do this thing, which is, it's like we're swatting away an annoying fly. Like, yeah, 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 I'm going to do it later. And we have like
Yeah.
the postponement of our existence is one of just the saddest things because that's precisely what I saw with my mom, right?
Mm.
Dreams,
Right.
dreams
Right.
were there. Like sometimes people don't even have dreams, and that's just a different story, and they can still be
Right.
cultivated. But when you
Mm-hmm.
have an idea, and I don't care if it's grandiose, I don't care if it's just silly and remote or silly, like whatever that thing is, if you want to do it, when you find yourself saying, I'll do it when, and you fill in the blanks, when work dies down, or when the kids leave the house, when the kids go to
Mm-hmm.
college, or when I retire, or when I
Yeah.
lose weight, all the things that are contingent on later, I just want to take you and I want to lovingly slap you and say like, and not, and it's also funny because then there's this presupposition that that means that you might die by then. And let's be honest, like you're probably not going to die in the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
And so like
Mm-hmm.
literally statistically, you probably won't be. So I'm not necessarily thinking do it, go learn how to speak Croatian and take that trip because you might die. I'm actually thinking about it like, what about your life today? Like, who is standing up and taking a stand for the life you're living now? Because these are
Mm-hmm.
the days and the weeks and the months that are just passing us by and becoming indiscernible from one another for a life that we are just bagging for later. And I feel like you might actually get to do all that stuff later and you're going to have one hell of a retirement and good for you. But
Mm-hmm.
what about this decade? What about this
Right.
year? What about this
Right.
month?
Yeah.
Let's be careful that we're not postponing it. And that's why stop denying the death idea. Let's come back and use that as that unfortunate but real spark plug.
Yeah, I agree. It reminds me, I've done some talks kind of on the periphery of this kind of conversation that we're having. And I kind of refer to it, I kind of default to the medical. I call it the pox of the untills. And it's, I'm going to wait, like, and it's the same list you just said. I'm going to
Yeah.
wait until I graduate. I'm going to wait until I get my first job. I'm going to wait until I, get married, wait until I
Yeah.
get divorced. And the untills start to add up. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden you're at a point where, that timer on Kevin Kelly's desktop ran out and, that's all she wrote, folks. So,
Yeah.
Well, Jodi, I think this is a great kind of backgrounder for teeing up for the book. And I want to start to go into a deeper dive into that. But before I do, I want to share what some notable others have had to say about it. So Adam Grant, #1 New York Times bestselling author and host of the podcast Rethinking, said, "This book is a breath of fresh air. Drawing on her training in positive psychology, Jodi Wellman has an utterly delightful way of making us smile while making us think. It's a surprisingly fun and fruitful read about making the most of our scarce time." Arthur C. Brooks, #1 New York Times bestselling author of Build the Life You Want, co-authored with Oprah Winfrey, said, "How strange that death is the most normal part of life, yet so often a taboo subject. In You Only Die Once, Jodi Wellman wants to change that and to help all of us live better, happier lives." And Michael Bungay Stanier, a bestselling author and also a prior guest on the show, said, "This is one of the very best books I've read about creating a well-lived life. It's practical and sassy, has both depth and a light touch, and made me laugh and think and act." So Jodi, boy, all high praise from some pretty heavy hitters. so
Thank you.
I think I know the answer to this question, but what was the goal in taking your experiences, taking 4,000 Mondays, and putting it all together in a book?
What a cool question. And thanks, by the way, for reading those. I've never had anybody read that out loud, and it just feels very warm and fuzzy. It's a funny experience. Yeah.
This show could be a half hour longer if I read all the rest. So,
well, why don't we just take that half hour?
Okay, we'll do a round 2.
No,
Jodi's hit parade.
Oh my goodness. No, the goal, this is such a good question because I've thought a lot about this as I have been, now it's 6 months since the book came out, and I've had an interesting journey of, am I happy with the outcome? Which is a funny question, but a lot of people will ask when you've accomplished something, because they make this big assumption that good for you. For example, in this case, the book came out, you must just be so darn satisfied. And the answer, of course, is yes, fundamentally. And
Right.
like for you, I think about your really cool and inspiring, illustrious list of some of your life accomplishments, right? And as we all know through the science, but it's not always intuitive, many of us we dupe ourselves into thinking that it's the running through the finish line that's going to feel good, when it's actually the process of building and the progress we make along the way towards the goal, and then some of the tidbits. So I will tell you that the goal for the book, I was initially thinking of it as twofold, that I wanted to get all this stuff out and have it be part of this business. So I want to use it to create more speaking opportunities. So part of it was very sort of pedantic, like this is logistical business stuff. And it was, of course, about, this is like my mission in life, as nerdy as it might sound. Like, this is back to me saying earlier, Chris, that like, I can't not do this. Somehow, it's almost like, not that I am possessed, but some days I feel possessed, but that I want to just, I have to stand on the mountaintops and scream this. And so if I can't scream it, well, then I will at least write it. Actually, I did do the audiobook. So I did, that's 10 hours and 6 minutes of this. But so it was very much about getting it out. And now that it's out, and I've gotten like caught up in a little bit initially of then how does one measure success? I'm not looking at book sales. I'm not looking at, PR hits. It's very, it's very potentially intoxicating, but that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
Every time I get a note from somebody, random DM on Instagram or on LinkedIn or through my contact form on my website, and I get to hear about someone who's made a choice in their life to do anything that's widening or deepening, with more vitality or more meaning, or they've just decided to go for it, or that they are, they're not dead yet. They say, I'm older and I'm still going for it. I'm finishing college, or I've decided to book that trip, or I've decided to apply for this retreat, or I'm actually out of breath right now because I get swept up in this idea that like, sometimes all it takes is this reminder and a nudge. And we need it consistently, unfortunately. But if I was able to help make that happen through this book and help someone make a choice that doesn't have to be a big scary one. Not everybody needs to quit their job or get divorced or move to Portugal. No, I mean, if you need to do those things, rah rah, do it. But for most of us, it's about, wow, like I I I joined the gym. I did it. I've been putting it
Yeah,
off.
yeah,
Or I,
yeah.
st- I blew the dust off my journal and I'm going to start writing the poetry book again. And and the stories are just so uplifting. And again, I don't care what it like each person's story. I actually am
Right,
absurdly
right.
curious, like you are. Like I find them
Yeah,
fascinating. Last
yeah.
night, back to the aforementioned workshop I did, one woman was like talking about how she, regretted not posing nude for this famous artist back in the day when she was in her 20s, and
Wow.
she's currently in her 60s. And so now she's using that as this impetus to be like, I am no longer living a life that I would look back on and think, why didn't you just go for it? So she's going for it. And now she gave a few examples of how she's actively, going back to
That's
school. And
great.
so anyway, all I'm getting, and I'm going to get swept up in everyone else's lives, which is the point, is that I want us to wake the F up to life
Yeah.
because it is so
Well,
fleeting. Yeah.
I mean, that's so cool to hear because, I mean, from the mechanic side of books, gaming sales and stuff and rankings and stuff is just, all a big, mess. And people can, Google and see a million ways to Thursday to see, how that stuff can be manipulated. But you can't
Hmm.
manipulate these kinds of comments from people. And it's sort of like you get what I refer to as emotional royalties.
Ooh.
You get to
Ooh.
get people that are so impacted to then take the time, to
Yeah.
grab their phone or sit at their machine or their computer and, take the time to say, God, I gotta reach out to Jodi. This was just, finally, I got off sitting on that tack and got out to doing it. So, I mean, that's so fulfilling and oftentimes such a void for an author. It's one thing to see
Yeah.
books say, but you see the metrics are book sales, not book
Yeah.
readership, not book life changingness. So, I mean, you are very fortunate to be able to get those because that's gold, that's treasure. So,
Well, thank you. I just wrote down on my sticky of the day, emotional royalties, because that's a really cool way of putting it.
oh,
And I
thanks.
and I recognize now, like I feel a bit selfish because, well, I guess like every time someone volunteers, they say it's one of the most selfish things you can do, and it's a win-win. So I don't
Hmm.
mean for this to, yeah, it's not about my experience is me, but I feel like um, it sounds a bit more self-centered about, I get to
No,
feel good knowing that I've helped
I don't take
people.
it that way. I ask you the question,
Okay, fine.
and it's sort of like your book. I mean, I'm going to put words in your mouth, but it also is sort of like, and there's much more to it than the distillation I'm going to say, but it's almost like your little manifesto. To be able to say, I have this piece of work that is scientifically based, but does not at all read like like anybody's master's thesis, and is so engaging and so fun. I mean, I found myself after I'd gone through it, like just kind of going back and flipping to like some of your illustrations and stuff, and kind of showing my wife. I said, "This is why Jodi's so funny. Read this." So
Oh.
it's just and to take it. I mean, there's a certain level of difficulty and paradox to
Mm,
be able to pull off a book like this. And
mm,
I'm going to shift off the book and more into the content of what
mm,
you've talked about, but to be able to do it in a way as you've probably done, with your consulting and your coaching, to make it non-threat. Not only just non-threatening means it's neutral, but also to
mhm,
make it engaging, and to make
mm,
it,
mm,
fun in quotes. I mean, it's sort of like, I mean, the fun part is the living your life.
mm, yeah.
The memento mori aspect of it, is kind of just one of the tools that you can for people that fits for, Marcus Aurelius or whoever else that kind of fits for to be able to have that. Um, so you throughout the book and even this conversation so far, you've mentioned memento mori
Yeah.
as a kind of it's a principle. It's a kind of a Stoic philosophy. I think I'm not a philosopher, but tell
Mm.
us more about what it translates into from Latin and why it's important in your book and your work and for our lives.
Yeah, yeah. It is the Latin expression for remember we must die. And it has been around for centuries, plural. And I mean, you think about some of the art you look back on, like from the Renaissance period, and they've got pictures of tableaus, right, of a table, and there's a bouquet of flowers, and some of them are dying, and there are often clocks, like or the countdown timers, the hourglasses. They show skulls, of course, which is pretty darn obvious. But bubbles, the painters would paint bubbles, which, I mean, they're going to pop any minute. Their death is imminent. Any kind of, they're called vanitas, and these images that help people remember that life was short. Now, back in the days, I mean, if you go back hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, the lifespan was extremely abbreviated. So
Yeah,
it
super
was easy to
short.
remember, like, life short, like it literally might be next week for me because
Yeah,
I'm already
yeah.
25, right? The idea, and depending on the cultures, there were some religious underpinnings too, where it's, live in such a way that you will die and then be able to enter the pearly gates, for example. So some of it was based around the notion with religiosity, but it's mostly just around the theory and philosophy about life is short, live it. There's an old quote I love by Virgil. It says, "Death twitches my ear, live," he says, "I'm coming." And just the kind of like it's spooky and it can get
Yeah.
morbid. And that's why I doodle, is because let's poke fun at it. Let's use this. And I also love the idea that it has been a thread woven throughout time. It's like the one shared thing we all experience, right? You know,
Right. That's good.
T.S. Eliot says, like, when it comes down to it, brass tacks, all we have in common, like, this is what it is. It's life, copulation, and death. And so it's coming. Death is coming.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's this unifying thing in a very bizarre way, which, I think we don't think a lot about, and I don't talk a lot about either, but it's that, back to the idea that I said earlier about the absurdism, which is a branch of philosophy, this idea, like, we're all trying really hard to just do our best. Some of us are doing better than others and to each other. And, we're just like making our way and trying to look half decent, trying to succeed, and then, like, here we all are, we're in the same boat. Like, we're all careening towards the end. And so sometimes that actually makes me think, if we all got a little more in touch with that, maybe we would be maybe a little bit better to each other. But
Yeah.
some evidence proves the opposite, but that's getting a little detailed.
Well, I also have to say that, speaking of the memento mori aspect of it, I've never seen a book dedicated to the Grim Reaper. so, and it also, I mean, it reminds me, I mean, it sort of, your humor kind of diffuses the morbidness of it. It's sort of like when you see the cartoon ghost versus a horror movie or something like that. But
Right.
it also, yeah, from a more philosophical level, like you were, Virgil. It also reminds me, like, not so much philosophy, but I guess just literature. Like Saul Bellow said, death is more like the dark backing that a mirror needs if we're going to see anything.
Ooh.
And when I read your book, that kind of resonated, kind of came back to me going, yeah, when you have that juxtaposition of finality, the memento mori aspect, really in full throat, to me, I find that, super motivating and super, in a way inspiring as well too. So, you've talked about your Mondays. You've named a company after it. Could you share, maybe we can kind of go into some of the practicality kinds of things. What are some of the daily practices that people might want to try on for increasing their mortality awareness, make that dark backing of a mirror?
Yeah, dark backing. I love that. Wrote that one down too. You're filling up my sticky here. Um, the So the countdown, I think, is implied, but maybe in case it's not super clear, every week having that be a number that is front of mind. Visual helps, which is why I like writing the number down. I also think the visual reminders, because, many of us are visual learners, but we need the reminders, having little talismans or totems or little things around that might help to just be a visual. For me, I mean, if you could see where I am right now in my office, this is overkill. I think I've got probably no less than like 100 little skulls and little reminders. It's like, for me, it's like, this is not a reminder. This is overkill, honey.
The Addams Family. Here we go.
Right, but it's not a black. I mean, I love black. I wear black all the time, but it is very light and fluffy. I actually buy this is art. Morbid Art 101, but on Amazon there is a really great skull you could buy. It's only $19.99, but it's like an actual, it looks fabulous. It's like a plaster cast skull. And I paint them, I spray paint them in like hot pink and like a really pretty gray. And so you
I
can,
love it.
I mean, so you could have an art project, but That could
There
be,
you go.
a little reminder. But when you come across it, I like to do things at maybe workshops and stuff where I'll give people little stone skulls or little tombstones that just put it in your wallet or your pocket, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's right. Yep, I'm temporary. Um, I'm also a fan of, back to the idea about, I call it defanging death, but like have the conversation with people, and you don't need to go into it, especially with people who are already anxious about death. You don't need to talk about when are you going to die and how do you think you're going to die. You could just go the soft approach, which is like, hey, what's the stuff on your bucket list? Um, Having the conversation about cool stuff you'd like to do before you go. And that, at least
Mm-hmm.
the energy is more about the neat endeavors. And then it could start to get it, because I will just share with you, I'm very double-edged sword about the bucket list, because I think it could just be a way to capture dreams that then die. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because the psychology around sometimes positive fantasies will make us feel just good enough about the idea we have that, yay, I wrote it down on my list, and then I close my journal, and then I go and I live my life, and I'm like, but I didn't do anything, but I felt good writing it down. And so we need to have a deadline, literally deadline. So having a date, like, hey, cool. You want to go and do that family ancestry trip over in Ireland? Amazing. When do you think it would happen? Like, when's a good time? Is it next spring? Oh
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm gonna have a big problem. Okay, so is it, oh, fall of 2027? Cool. And then all of a sudden it's real. So anyways, I'm talking about it with friends, I think is important. I think there's a psychology talks too about this idea about practicing death, like little ways, especially if death is really still squeamishy for you. It's about starting to look and understand that, oh my goodness, there's the cycle of birth and death is all around us, whether it's the tree out in your yard or through the seasons, or whether it
Mm-hmm.
is the bouquet of flowers I mentioned. It could be just even having a picture of a loved one who's dead, who died.
Mm-hmm.
Notice that I'm more direct. I don't always say that a loved one who's passed. It's okay to say
Mm-hmm.
the word dead.
Mm-hmm.
That having, Uncle Hector, up, hey, Hector, like have that be a reminder that he's no longer here. Little
Mm-hmm.
things like every living thing will change. Every river flows. Every job you have, there's going to be something that changes. You'll get a new boss. The company might close. Like the fact that change is always happening, and these are all just subtle reminders that we can start to use as accepting in a very
Mm-hmm.
kind of Buddhist West or Eastern philosophy way, that
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
accepting that that things naturally ebb and flow, and it will naturally come to an end.
That's good. And just a little corny cliche kind of thing.
Mm.
I don't mean to trivialize it, but I also, one of the issues I have, like you highlighted it to say, when someone's died, versus what some people might feel the more cushiony, someone's passed. And I totally get that and respect that.
Hmm.
But it also makes me feel like my parents have passed, if you will, but they are still very present.
Mm.
And it's the idea, that's why I have a little chafing with the past. Yes, they've died. Yes, and maybe you could say, we put them to rest, or, whatever other kinds of,
Mm.
colloquial term that feels comfortable. It's always a
Mm.
person's preference. But I always still feel like, there's a presence of that person. Like you just said, a picture of someone who's died. Well, that
Mm.
helps keep them in the present. That then becomes, like you mentioned, that could be a totem, as well for some people. So just want to jam that in as a sidebar that, I like I understand the issue of someone has died, they are no longer here, but they can nevertheless, be present in our thoughts, present in our
Mm.
hearts,
Mm.
present on our bookshelf,
Mm.
that sort of thing. So,
Well, I love you mentioning that, because I think that that helps us to savor the experience of knowing and loving and or liking
mm-hmm,
somebody. But I think
mm-hmm,
it also is internal for us, is that like we are leaving a legacy. So I think about it like after you go, you're also going to be in someone's mind, because you've worked with them or crossed their path in some way. And that is our opportunity in many ways also to shape a life worth living now that we're proud of, that we either will be, we think about, well, how do I want to be described when I'm gone? How do I
right,
want to be remembered? And I've always found the research super fascinating too, that it's often for people, it's not so much about leaving a positive legacy that's motivating, it's avoiding leaving a negative one. So
right,
sometimes in
right.
workshops, there's this exercise, right, where it's like, what would you like etched into your tombstone? Some people will be like, oh, I want to be known as being loving and kind, or as being super creative or super funny. And then that can be, okay, are you living in a way that would earn you the right to have that etched into your tombstone? Question mark. But then the other flip side is like, how would you absolutely hate to be described? Like, what would be the thing that would make you roll over in your grave, And someone would be like, oh my God, I would hate to be described as a cheapskate, or, as someone who was just kind of lazy, or whatever that is. And it's, well, okay, so are you living in a way now that nobody could ever call you lazy? How would you be demonstrating that? And then these are opportunities just to, again, as always, like evaluate and reflect and go, okay. And then maybe take action if it feels motivating to do so.
That makes me, I want to kind of skip around, because you also talk about the difference between a eulogy and a obituary. Can you talk about those differences?
Yeah. I think both exercises are worth doing, by the way, like drafting your eulogy and obituary. So the obituary is the one that's brief, and it's usually, in the olden days, it's in the newspaper. My dad's so cute. He reads the Toronto Star obituaries every day, and he's always pleased when he's not in it. Ha ha ha. Yeah. And so that's the, succinct. And in the book, I actually go through an exercise. There's like a really brief framework and, rough outlines, like 200 words or something. But it's really, that's like a really brief encapsulation of kind of like who you were, what you did. So that's how people would know you, right? Like maybe you were a father to these people and animals, and here's the cause that you were interested in, and here's what you did for a living. It's a little bit more of like the outward encapsulation. And there's value in doing that, because it's like a succinctness exercise. The eulogy is juicier. And this is where I'm a fan of actually writing two versions. This is a good, personal retreat day. Like take yourself to Starbucks or a nice hotel lobby and sit down and do some writing. The first eulogy is the one where, if imagining somebody saying a lot of words about you, right? So that's like up at the pulpit or up at your memorial or your wake or whatever you're going to be having for yourself if you want something. What are people going to say about you? What are the stories? What are the little anecdotes? What are those moments and memories that will encapsulate your legacy? So I recommend doing a draft of your ideal eulogy. And then I recommend doing a draft of what is realistic about what people would say with you right now about you. And then there's going to be a gap, right? Because we always have a fantasy version of ourselves, or what's called best possible selves in psychology. So, okay. If your fantasy version of the best possible self, that eulogy is about how you achieved these cool things and how you always made people feel like they were the most important person in the room, and you're like, well, I don't actually feel like right now, if I died, that my real eulogy would say that, then that would be like, well, okay, well, duh, how might I need to interact with people starting today so that I earn the right to be described as so focused and listening and really just making people feel important, like they matter, like that. It's all designed not to focus on the fact that you're going to be lying out in a casket. That's beside the point. That's whatever. Or an urn. I don't want to leave us cremators out. But it's more about, okay, cool. So how do you want to live your life now? That might be like, wow, I feel like I need to just slow down a little bit. And just going back to that example of making people feel like they are the most important person in the room. Well, I think I need to really be conscious. And wow, I'm going to be interacting with a friend at lunch today. And today, here's how I'm going to show up when I meet him for lunch. I'm going to lean forward and put my hands under my chin and just listen. So all of a sudden now you leave that lunch and you feel better about yourself, and that person likes you a heck of a lot more because you did a lot more listening. And now all of a sudden life feels a little bit different.
I love that. It's such a parallel or augmentation of the proverbial, fly to Tahiti before I die kind of thing. I mean, there's the quasi bucket list, and we'll get to the bite-sized bucket lists and the good and the bad of bucket lists. But I mean, it's sort of like, this is you in the fabric of who you are as a person, how you want to, how you just said, like your best self, your idealized self kind of thing. And to realize that, there also can be a, in the cutthroat pursuit of doing 15 things on your bucket list in the next 15 months, you become, a jerk, to your loved ones, or absentee, I'm going to, I really love my family, but I'm going to be gone on a, 6-month climb someplace, kind of thing. And hopefully I'll come back, and hopefully they'll be there when I get back, kind of thing.
Right.
So this, I think it adds another facet or dimension to thinking about, not just how we live our lives, living a life in full. Generally, I think the default, for myself included, is to think about activities. But an activity can be a check off of, I sailed around the world. It can also be, I have a wonderful relationship, with my spouse, or my kids, or my best friend, or my boss, or whatever it might be. So I think that's what you just said, just really kind of triggered that this is the bouillabaisse, the richness, the combination, the synergy of all these different kinds of things. So,
I'm so glad you said that. And also, I love bouillabaisse, love that. And I made a mistake, I think, early on when I was doing workshops, is I would get people thinking about possible deathbed regrets and or ways they wanted to live wider and deeper, like cool stuff they want to do. And you are really right. Like the default for us is to think about activities, achievements, cool things and moments. And like, let's absolutely make time and room to write those things down and put dates beside them. Oh, and then do them. One of the things I've come to realize, though, is that there's just as much credence to not just the things we do, but our ways of being. And that is an opportunity to get people thinking about, and this goes back to a lot of Dan Pink's research around regrets that I love, that there are different categories of them. Like some of us will regret, for example, on our deathbed, not, I don't know, say, training for a triathlon, or not pursuing education, or like these are activities, right? But some of them are actually more about back to the ways of being. It's like, for me, I would choose, if I was to go tonight, may I rest in peace, around the category of boldness regrets. Like I would regret not being bolder, making gutsier choices, or putting myself out there and risking a little bit more. That's a way of being. That's not a thing that I did or didn't do. Same thing about, a lot of parents might say, if they're given the prompt, oh yeah, I wish I was more present with my kiddos. I wish like I put my phone not just down, but like in the other room, and sat down and did a little bit of Lego before I lost my mind, with my kid, and then go back to the phone. You know what I mean? Like, so like, some of it is about, it could even be about, being more forgiving, or more patient, or just more self-compassionate. So there are ways of being that I think are just as important. I mean, my gosh, maybe even more important than like, wow, the fact that I did this cool thing. I mean, I think it's all important. Back to the bouillabaisse.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so another maybe ingredient in this, or maybe this is the first bowlful, but are we kind of talking about what you refer to as pregrets, or is that something different?
Totally. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that puppy up. Anything that, and the best way to mentally imagine this is that, it's almost curtains, right? So like you are on your deathbed. It's just the best way to get ourselves experimenting with this. What would be examples of things that you wished you had done? And I'm going to be very clear here and say we need to dismiss the regrets of commission, which are the regrets, like the mistakes we made, the stupid stuff we did that we wish we hadn't. Research is clear that over time we soften a little bit about our, perception about how, I did that stupid thing, let that go. I am more concerned, because we are more concerned at the end about the paths not taken. So what would be an example of something you'd think, I always wanted to do that, but I just never did. Or, I never made time for it, or I said I would do it later, or I chickened out, or gosh, who cares why or how? And it doesn't need to be something magnanimous. Like I always wanted to start that nonprofit. It could be, I always wanted to pick up the pottery wheel and do pottery, and I never did. Or it could be, so those are pregrets, because the good news, the curtains have not been drawn. We're still alive, most of us.
There's
and
time.
that we get to make that choice now. So it's like, okay, wow, look at you in that mental exercise. You wrote down pottery, or you wrote down nonprofit, or you wrote down that you wanted to, start the business or go and get back on the dating apps or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Cool. Wow, why don't we take one step and maybe get to that today? Not all the things. I want to be super clear. Like sometimes you'll write a list
Hmm.
out of like 38 things. Well, now we do the art of of not procrastinating, of prioritizing. Very different than procrastinating. Now we go like pick and choose which one might feel most energizing. Or for some of us, if we've just been super, super backseating our lives, maybe we just need to get a small win. Be like, what's an easy thing you can do? Just to show yourself, yes, you're the kind of
Hmm.
person that lives your life. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to register for bridge class. Okay, go, fine, go do that. Show yourself that I get to do cool things. I do fun things. I make time for myself, or I learn new things, or whatever it is. So
That's good.
those are pregrets, the regrets in the making, and you can totally course correct them, which to me is so exciting.
And is one of the ways to sniff them out? Then we're kind of on the pre vibe here with a pre-mortem.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I
Talk
so
about that, the fun autopsy. So tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, I want the book to be super practical about like looking at your life and then having some ahas and then making some, choices and changes if you want. And so the
Hmm.
pre-mortem is this like deep dive into all things you before you go. And it's this pulse check. It's like, how are things going? What's working? What's flatlined? Like what doesn't have a pulse anymore? And some things don't have a pulse, but we don't care right now. Like you could be in a really busy phase building an amazing career and you're like, yeah, my social life is in the tanker, but I don't care. I'll pick it up later. And you're okay with that. But for some of
Hmm.
us, we're like, I miss friendship. Or maybe your recreation is just like recreation. What's that again? I don't have hobbies. And that's your
Sure.
chance to go, okay, well, like maybe this is an area that I want to revitalize. What would I do? And that's back to this like the pre-mortem is what will help us to determine either the areas of our life and or the specific things that could be right hanging in front of us like wow, I really used to miss going for a walk around the block after dinner. Wow, maybe I could just do I start doing that again? Do I start doing that tonight? Like that could change your life in an instant. Tiny little
Hmm.
things, right?
That's good. I think it helps. It's the iterative processes sometimes, and it also just. I think sometimes, regardless of how what in reality is a small thing, but might feel like a huge intimidating thing of going out for that walk, or oh not tonight, or oh my show is on, or oh my
Yeah.
foot hurts, or oh it's cold, or whatever. But then just to to actually go out and to say, okay, well, I'm not going to walk around the block. I'm going to walk halfway around the block, and then
Yeah.
that can be sort of enough of the icebreaker, and then hopefully it goes well. You don't get bit by a dog or anything,
Yeah.
and then you go, well, that's kind of fun, and hey, I bet, maybe by this time next week, and again, not to over construct it and not to, say I'm going to, from walking to Everest kind of a thing, but,
Yes.
just to allow that so that you don't have all this, oh, it's such a big deal. And oh, there's so much inertia that, the little flywheel aspect of it, of get it going,
Yeah.
get some momentum, makes it a little easier the next time. And then also to not beat yourself up. I read a great thing about like, just, when you go on a trip and your diet goes sideways or your exercise goes out the window or whatever, because just the nature of your travel doesn't allow
Yeah.
for what you would typically do, to
Yeah.
say, okay, that was that time. The trip is over. I'm back to my routine. I can get back in, regain. I probably gained a little weight, lost a little muscle,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And, but rather than just saying, okay, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
That's it. I got to get back on the horse. And, and I think, I feel like with your book, that's kind of one of the things of saying,
Yes.
try it out, see what works, and in your like your little worksheety kind of things and stuff like that. I think just helps identify for people to get over that inertia of, oh my God, where am I going to start? Oh, it's
Yeah.
just too big, and
Yeah.
so again,
Yes. I
brava. So
I'm so glad you picked up on that because I think we really consistently underestimate the impact of even the smallest little things. And you're highlighting something that I want to write a little more about and even research first is our propensity to have this all or nothing thinking. because I think that if we feel like we can't fully engage, well, then I'm just going to stay on the couch. Now, trust me, like the
Yeah.
couch is one of my very favorite places. So I'm not
That's
judging
right.
anybody. Like you'll
That's
see me
right.
there every night. And yeah,
Self-care, self-care.
thank you, code quote. But it's one of those, if we're, is it really all or nothing? Because then what that really leads to is if I can't fully go balls to the wall with this life that really sounds cool to live, then I'm just not going to engage at all. And I say, well then, well then we all lose. You know, if you're not playing even a little bit, like it counts. And it's not even like we're failing at life and I'm not going to win at life unless I fully engage. So it's like even doing one little thing, right? Making a choice today to do the walk to the mailbox and back, which maybe you would do anyways, but maybe it is around the block, or maybe it is your version of like, you know what, I tried a new recipe. That was kind of cool. Or I reached out to my old friend from college and that, wow, like it was a really neat conversation. Or wow, like I went and got bangs, you know, that's different for me. Or wow, I went and I started a whole new, I started reading a mystery novel. Like these are little tiny things that don't roll your eyes, because these are small
Yeah.
things that are choices in life that we can do that just shake it
Yeah.
up a little bit, because novelty is just so crucial,
Yeah. Well,
even
it's
though, yeah.
and this is like your bucket-sized bite-sized bucket list, kind of
Yeah.
concept too. And I think even just the simple, I want to read 3 pages at night before I go to bed in a
Yeah.
novel. I've gotten so out of novels, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And you find, all of a sudden it's 15 pages, and it's like, I'm going to read this tomorrow morning with coffee once I get up. It's
Yes.
that's to me kind of the flywheel aspect of it. It's sort of
Flywheel.
like, yeah.
Yes.
So.
Oh, love that.
Good. Okay. All yours, Jodi. So, I want to talk about that, maybe just to beat this flywheel aspect. What are some of the ways? Let's say you've gotten a little, an inch or a nudge of momentum, but man, there's the kids and there's the boss and there's the car's got a flat and there's the this and the that's. When people start to get overwhelmed, it almost seems like, like we talked about earlier, like brand and prioritization of projects. But
Yeah.
life sometimes blows a maybe not a timeout but an overtime for
Huh.
this is the furnace is broke, and you can so much for reading that novel over coffee tomorrow that you got to call the repair person and you got to do this, you got to do that. What are some of your
Yeah.
tips about when we do get overwhelmed, so that we don't just, again, we wrote it down, maybe we put a date on it, we put it in a drawer, and 3 years later when we grab our stapler, we go, oh shoot, there it is. So what are some of your tips for what do we do when we've got the desire, but we're just there's too many other whack-a-moles that we have to deal with.
Yeah. Whack-a-mole. That's such a perfect image. Yeah. The very first thing I can think of is acceptance. It's that sometimes, because, an old ism is that our happiness is sort of defined as the difference between our expectations and reality. And, reality is going to
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
cacophony of garbage that's like coming our way,
Yes.
right? So like,
Yes.
it's just a matter of like, when's the next proverbial flat tire? So if some of it is this, if you're thinking you're going to have this like fantasy staycation week off where everything's going to be great, yeah, they're like just sort of like an expectation and almost like this sort of shrugging, almost amused acceptance that here we go. And I don't mean it in a resigned way, like the snide life sucks way, and then we die. But like, number one,
Yeah.
I do think that there's just a little bit to be said for recalibrating our expectations. So there's that. But then, yeah, we're like, yeah, thanks. But back to reality, sick kid and or flat tire and all the things. This to me comes back to sizing what it takes to bring a little bit of aliveness into life. And it's expanding on our all or nothing discussion. Is it one of the things I do in groups is I have this exercise about writing out a list of stuff that makes you happy. And I have prompts, right? Like, what's your favorite smell and favorite taste and all the little favorite movies and books and all the things. Because let's be honest, busy, successful professionals, some might argue that some genders more than others are out of touch with what makes them happy because they're looking after other people, or we're just busy. And we kind of we lost the plot on ourselves and what brings us joy. And furthermore, it's this, okay, well, write out a list of little tiny things you can do that do just happen to make you happy, and it doesn't need to change your life. And usually in a group, it helps to have examples, because then people can start to get warmed up, because usually people look like deers in headlights, like, I don't know. And then one person says, oh my gosh, tending and watering my plants, clipping them, like, oh God, I love that too. Or I don't know, just sitting down in this patch of sunlight and petting my dog or brushing my dog. Or it could be looking at Seinfeld blooper reruns on YouTube, or sitting and reading a chapter, or just sitting outside on the park bench and just letting the sun sit on my face, or like looking at, so sometimes it's nature for people, sometimes it's prayer or meditation, or it could be, kneading dough or letting it rise and then, baking it. It could be something, again, that is not magnanimous, like I'm only happy when I'm sailing around the Mediterranean. And if that's your life, well, wow, cool. But and so having these little, almost like a cheat sheet about when you have a found 5 minutes, how you want to spend it. So even in the day that you described, the overwhelmed day, deadlines, other people's nagging needs, annoyances and things that derail the cool thing you were going to do, we can still fit in pockets of time, because I will say there are still these moments of discretionary time, even if it's your 10 minutes before bed, where what I often do is I find myself mindlessly living in a way that's not going to deliver any kind of aliveness. So I might be scrolling. Now, sometimes scrolling is good. Often it's not. Or I'm checking my email, and that's necessary, but it could wait. Whereas I could make a choice to say, what if I did sit for this 5 minutes before bed, instead of going through my stupid phone, which never helped anybody? 5 minutes before bed ain't going to help anybody.
Right.
Look at my emails.
Right.
It's going to be waiting for me tomorrow. What if I did read, again, a book that made me feel like I was smart or entertained? Or what if I did sit and just do 5 minutes of breathing? Or what if I did do 5 minutes of just reflecting on my gratitude journal? Or what if I did, have a moment with my husband that was actually not just watching forensic files? What if it was just something where, again, these are little choices where when you tune into what makes you happy and what makes you feel just a little more alive than dead inside, if you stitch together just a few more of those in a day, that's the difference sometimes between feeling like life is boring or ho-hum and life is actually getting lived around here. And it doesn't mean that you had to go to a concert.
That's lovely. It's so actionable and doable. And, as you noted, like just having that list. I mean, people can literally like write it down, put it on a Post-it, stick it on the mirror, put it wherever, put it in their diary, their journal, what have you. It's not exactly a fit, but it makes me think of, I'm also a big fanboy of your newsletter.
Thank you.
And you recently had one called "Do You Record the Moments of Your Life?"
Oh, yeah.
And boy, howdy, did that like resonate with me. So, and I think you made reference, I think it was actually maybe off mic, but like, I've got my life list where I sort of made this combo pack of stuff I want to do and then stuff that I've done. Because sometimes when my motivation, my momentum is flagging, I sort of think, oh God, that was, all the good old days are all the good old days. They're all behind me. I need something, I can't get motivated. None of these things are ever going to be possible and blah, blah, blah. I'll kind of look at that and it'll give me a little oomph to say, oh, I did do this. And that was just 2 years ago I did that. And I'm not that much different than 2 years ago.
Yes.
So I like keeping track. So once I've done something, a million years ago, I used to have a Palm Pilot, and I had to-do lists in it. I remember if you took the goofy little plastic stylus and touched the little box, a line went through whatever that was. And back then, that felt good because they were just like work things. I didn't care, okay, I sent in my report. Yay, it's done. But for my life, it's a different story because then it literally becomes my life story. So for me, it was like, do you record the moments of your life? It was like, Jodi, that's a hell yes. And
Yes,
how? Yeah, to a fault. So maybe you could share, like, what was the motivation of what your thoughts were about it, some of the tips, because you gave some in that I thought were really, sharp. So could you share some of the tips and ways that you personally do, and maybe why people should, or I don't know if they
Yeah.
shouldn't, but I feel, my bias is that, I find it helpful. But tell us,
Yeah.
kind of unpack that one, because that one really kind of was right as a bullseye for me.
Yeah, I'm glad that it clicked for you. And the research is clear that uh, we can savor over different time frames. We can savor looking back at things we did, reminiscence. We can savor the
Mm-hmm.
moment, if we're actually freaking present for it every now and then. And then we can
Mm-hmm.
pre-savor or anticipate cool stuff that we have coming up. And I think we miss the boat sometimes on capturing when you do the thing. Like, for example, when you go and you have we did the wine tasting and then we did dinner, or, we went to the cat show, or, we went for a walk, or the thing that you want to record that was in any way some kind of highlight. And you
Mm-hmm.
can capture that. It's fodder for happiness later. Okay, so it's happiness now. You actually get a boost when you record it in the moment that you did this neat thing. And you were
Mm-hmm.
conveniently leaving out. This is not the journal about all of my thwarted dreams and unrequited loves and angers and, misfortunes, like maybe a separate journal. Maybe don't
Uh-huh.
spend too much time on that one. But I do think, and obviously there's value in that, but this is about how are you capturing it? And some people will keep a diary. Some people, what I do, I used to actually have those diaries that you would not, it's a calendar. Obviously, there are digital versions. I don't put in my
Mm-hmm.
uh, Gmail or my Outlook calendar the things that I did. I'd like to have it just be more visceral. So I
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
at Shutterfly or any printing place these days, I just make a custom notebook
Mm-hmm.
that has a cool picture on the front that's emblematic in some way of like what's going on in life or the
Mm-hmm.
season or the year. And then I tape in the receipts for the dinner or for the outing or for the movie. So it's just this neat way of looking back in archives of the cool life you led. And it's
Yeah.
not to brag to yourself later, but it kind of is. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like this evidence of a life that was lived. And it's not for anybody else. I just want to be clear. I mean, I suppose when you die, someone's going to find it and they would be like, whoa, she went to a lot of dinners and whatever. But this isn't about judgment from other people, good or bad. It's just capturing the cool stuff. And
Yeah.
you started to note something else back to the Palm Pilot era about looking at your to-do list. I'm a big fan, and I stuffed it in the book somewhere, of this idea about what I call tiny triumphs. And,
Mm-hmm.
we get down on ourselves, like you said, or we feel like we're only able to note and celebrate big accomplishments. Yeah, I don't know about you, but those are too far and fleeting in between. And I want to
Yeah.
be able to at least have a little bit of a success log of something that
Mm-hmm.
was like, this good thing happened. So sometimes it is ooh, won this account, or ooh, booked this speaking gig or whatever. But sometimes it's like, I'm really proud, like I made a really good casserole, or wow, like today was good, like the little boost of like,
Yeah.
I actually cleaned out the
Yeah.
cat litter box. And that was like,
Yeah.
I got around to doing it, or some like the little wins, or,
Yeah.
it could be at work. I used to do this when I was one-on-one coaching with clients because some of them were really upset that they had big long-term goals.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know there's research from the progress principle that progress towards the goal is what gives us a sense of satisfaction at work. It's not usually, yay, we reached the goal, because tomorrow it's old news. So
Right.
it's the
Right.
progress, but it's that some people had really long gaps between the milestones and the wins. And so
Huh.
sometimes it's like, well, what else happened this week? It's like,
Yeah.
you work with an executive and they're like, we didn't make progress on the goal. Life sucks. Okay, but what what
Yeah.
what worked? And when you
Mm-hmm.
dig a little deeper, they're like, actually, I was really proud. Like, we had a really difficult discussion at this meeting. And that was actually really good progress for us as a leadership team. Wow. So you actually you facilitated a really important conversation. Wow, that's a win. That's a tiny triumph. I would actually argue that one is not so tiny, but still
Right. Right.
capturing whether it's in your personal life or your work life. I mean, maybe they're both the same. But
Mm-hmm.
capturing those things, because especially if you're hard on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, two things. On a personal note, I have created this little habit. I'll get like a piece. This is so corny, but here we go.
I already love it.
I'll get a piece of, it has to be a special kind of paper with a special kind of pen with a special kind of ink. And it's not just a flimsy piece of paper. It's going to be something that's almost like, not exactly like cardboard, but it's something, that might come in, have, like a little booklet of something or whatever. So and for me right this second, it's probably 2.5 inches wide and probably 9 inches long. And I print everything, and I will print like something nice that's happened. It could be a small thing. Like I wrote down a very nice thing that a neighbor said to me. Okay. And it can be a big thing. My daughter and I went on a great big trip. And I just will put a bullet, and I'll just say what John said. I'll just put trip with Annika, who's my daughter, blah blah blah, and there'll be enough of a trigger. It's not journaling. It's just these little bullets. And oftentimes, if I'm going to bed and I've got monkey brain going on, I will take a look at that, and I'll just kind of scan it, and I'll like pick one or two of them, and I'll think about what that little bullet meant. I'll think about the trip that I went on. I'll think about what the neighbor said that was nice, and that takes my head and my emotions and the rest of my night, into a much better place than what it was, and I don't have to go searching for them. Like going, okay, a lot of nice stuff happened this last 6 months. What was that? And then it's like monkey brain, meta monkey brain. Now I'm trying to, I'm driving myself crazy trying to think about something nice to stop driving myself crazy with all the other noise. The other thing that is just so serendipitous is that I am working with a company and startup called Fire Memos. Okay. And Octavia Gorodima, who's been a past guest on this show, is the founder of that. And she, Techstars graduate, superstar, just amazing person. Shout out to her, and everybody look her up and look up Fire Memos. But her point is, her technology is exactly to your point, which is every week we have little wins at work that can just fall, off our radar. Yeah. And wouldn't it be nice 6 months from now when I'm doing my review with my boss that I could pull those up? So she's created this technology that kind of asks you and prompts you with an AI engine behind it, and then also does a very nice supportive coaching, an AI coaching algorithm as well too. So not only do you have a prompting system to record your wins, and literally, like I'm experimenting with it too. So every Friday, I get feedback from the AI telling me, here's the wins that you logged this week, kind of a thing. And then it just, and it'll talk to me about them. You said you did blah blah blah. How did that feel? It's just a very kind of quasi, kind of Rogerian kind of, questioning and stuff about what it was as a substitute for a human, but decent enough for what the tool is, kind of coaching. So I think you are spot on. And I think we'll probably start to see, with your paper journal. I have a bullet journal where I kind of do similar kinds of things. And
do you?
I'll print things out longhand, and I'll put a ticket stub in it, just exactly like you said. Or there'll be some little article that triggered some thought, and I'll paste the article in and write what it triggered in me. And, periodically I might come back to it, but I might never come back to it. But it's sort of like the point isn't that it's serving a purpose in the moment. It makes me feel better and complete that should I ever want to relive this, it's archived. And I know I can go grab it off the bookshelf. So, those are, we have a lot in common, Jodi. So
I think we do. I know. I knew.
Good
we
Lord.
would have
Identical cousins. Yeah.
Right.
So I know we're kind of running on time. Do you have just a couple more minutes? Maybe I can cover a couple of other things. Is that you good for time?
Yeah, I've got a couple more. Yeah.
Okay, good. I just, to kind of maybe because I'm getting to the end of the book. I have to say, and this is going to make me cry, but in your acknowledgement section, you have a note about your dad, and it really got to me. And you said that he's at his minus, I'm getting choked up, he's at his minus 416th Monday. And so shame on you for making me cry, Jodi. But I just thought that was so touching and so intelligent as a writer to be able to pull, you've dropped humorous, funny things, you've got great illustrations, and then to kind of wrap it up like that, I just thought was poetic. I mean, so I could not finish our conversation without doing a shout out, a call out for something like that. So,
Well, thank you for noticing that. And yeah, my dad is a special character in my life. And when I launched the website, this is going back now 4 years ago, he called and said, "Joe, I think I might have broken something because on that calculator, when it calculates your Mondays, it goes, at the time it was like minus 250 or whatever the number was." And I said, "Oh, Daddy, you didn't break it." Now I love him because here's his line, and he loves to bet the horse racing, and he goes, "Joe," he goes, "I'm playing with house money. It's great." So may we all get to the point where we play with house money.
Play with house money. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Super quick question. Did you do the illustrations?
Yes.
Gosh,
Yeah.
you are a polymath. What can't you do,
well,
girl?
Thank you so much for saying
Jeez.
that. And can I share with you, though, this to me is an example of how life is funny because I didn't know that I liked to draw until my mid-40s, until I started all this.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I just love the idea that think about the rest of us out there. We've got these dormant interests that all like it's almost like what could be inside if we could crack ourselves open, what other little talents and joys and interests could be inside of us? Because I didn't know I liked to draw. I just started doing it because I thought I wanted 4,000 Mondays to be whimsical because otherwise, again, everybody would just leave me. So yeah, I love the idea that who knows, you could be well, I mean, you are. I've seen your list of cool things you've done, but there could be another thing in there.
There you
that are
go. There you
talented at.
go. All right. I'm going to have to channel my inner Jodi Wellman. So, oh, well, we've covered a lot of territory, a lot of ground, a lot of areas, life, death, and everything in between. Is there anything that we've missed that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Thank you for asking. I would just again summarize. You noticed that I acknowledged the book to the Grim Reaper. I was probably sucking up a little bit, but I would also then literally bookend, our conversation with the idea of, gosh, tomorrow, as I like to say, it's this premise. It's not a promise. And if there's anything in our conversation we've been thinking about that has been bubbling about a little idea or a little dream, seize the freaking day and use the Reaper as your unwitting sidekick to be the one to say, "Hey, what am I waiting for? Don't wait. It's all there for you, waiting for you today, and it's just precious. So go for it. Whatever silly little thing or big thing that is, why not? We've got nothing to lose. We're all dying anyway."
I love it. I love it, Jodi. So from the business side of things, what are some of the best ways that listeners can learn more about you, to connect, to get the book, etc.?
Thank you for asking.
bet.
I'm over at 4000mondays.com. And so, yep, there are links to get the book there if that's of interest, and lots of downloads of fun things, the calculator. And I love chatting with anybody about this topic if anyone wants to reach out on that contact form. So, yeah, 4000mondays.com.
Good. Yeah, send your fan mail there, folks. And that's also, I'll put it in a plug for you. That's also where you can subscribe to Jodi's email or newsletter email. So please do that. That's a treat. Jodi, good Lord, thank you so much for the time to be on. I have so much enjoyed it. I was so looking forward to it. I so enjoyed the book, and it's just been a kick. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. This is time well spent.
As a reminder, listeners can read a summary of this episode and get access links to show notes via my LinkedIn Top Voice Companion article, along with past guests as well. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, and I hope it will help you in your journey to living your life in full. Until next time. Living a Life in Full is a production of Stout Media, a subsidiary of Gordian Knot, LLC. Assistant producer, Gracie Wong. Music, Dan O'Brien. Executive producer and host, Dr. Chris Stout. To learn more, stop by our website at Life in Full for show notes. And please recommend us to your friends and subscribe on your favorite platform. And as for the obligatory disclaimer, this podcast is for general information uses only and does not constitute the practice of psychology, medicine, nutrition, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical or psychological advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I take conflicts of interest seriously. For all of my disclosures as well as show notes, please see livingalifeinfull.org/podcast and my LinkedIn profile. Thanks, and until next time.